I transmigrated into a BL cultivation novel as the villain master who gets murdered by his own disciples. So naturally, my survival plan was simple. Don't abuse them. Don't provoke them. And absolutely do not let them discover I'm secretly an Omega. Unfortunately, my 5 alpha disciples stopped wanting to kill me and started fighting over who gets to keep me instead. Xinyuan woke up to the smell of blood. Not metaphorical blood. Real blood. Warm. Metallic. Thick enough to clog his nose. His eyes snapped open. 5 figures stood around his bed. All beautiful. All armed. All staring at him like they were deciding where to bury the body. Xinyuan immediately decided this was somebody else's problem. Unfortunately, he was the body. Pain exploded through his skull. Memories crashed into him in broken fragments. A cultivation sect. A villain master. 5 disciples. Abuse. Manipulation. Obsessive behavior. Then finally, death. Oh, Xinyuan whispered weakly. This is terrible. The room went colder. The tallest disciple stepped forward first. Gu Chongfeng. First disciple. Future sword sovereign. Calm enough to look merciful while committing massacres. His robes were stained black with blood. Not his own. Shizhuan, he said softly. Did you hit your head too hard? The softness was fake. Xinyuan knew that tone. It was the tone people used before poisoning emperors. Another disciple laughed from the corner. Wei Zhen leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, smiling beautifully while looking completely untrustworthy. You sound disappointed to still be alive. Correct observation. Xinyuan appreciated intelligence in others. The youngest disciple, Xie Rui, sat beside the bed holding spiritual needles between pale fingers. His eyes were red. Had he been crying? Before Xinyuan could process that horrifying emotional detail, memories hit him again. The original owner of this body. Yu Qingli, the villain master. A graceful Omega immortal adored by the cultivation world. Secretly a complete degenerate. He abused all 5 disciples emotionally for years while hiding behind a gentle smile. And according to the novel, tonight was the night they finally killed him. Xinyuan's soul nearly left his body a second time. I can explain, he blurted. Lu Yen snorted loudly from near the doorway. The broad-shouldered disciple looked like a war god forced into human form. You always say that before lying. No, listen, I'm serious. Xinyuan sat up too quickly and nearly blacked out. I'm not him. Silence. Jilan slowly lifted her sword. The only female disciple. Cold-faced. Ruthless. Beautiful enough to start wars accidentally. You expect us to believe possession? She asked flatly. Yes, Xinyuan answered immediately. Another silence. Because honestly, cultivation worlds accepted stranger things daily. People ascended into immortality by meditating beside waterfalls. One old man in these memories apparently cultivated through screaming at chickens. The standards here were low. My name is Xinyuan, he continued desperately. I don't know how I got here. I died. Then I woke up in this body surrounded by all of you looking homicidal. Wei Zhen tilted his head. Interesting. Not convinced. But interested. Gu Chongfeng moved closer until Xinyuan could feel terrifying spiritual pressure pressing against his skin. If this is another trick. It's not. Xinyuan grabbed Gu Chongfeng's sleeve before survival instincts remembered touching dangerous cultivators was usually a bad idea. Please don't kill me. The room froze. Because Yu Qingli never begged. Never showed weakness. Never looked afraid. But Xinyuan? Xinyuan looked one inconvenience away from crying. Xie Rui's fingers twitched slightly. Lu Yen frowned. Jilan narrowed her eyes. Wei Zhen smiled wider like he'd discovered a new toy. Terrible signs. Every single one. Then suddenly Xinyuan smelled something strange. Cold pine wood. Smoke. Rain. The scents hit him all at once from different directions. His body reacted immediately. His breathing stumbled. His skin heated strangely. What the hell was that? Gu Chongfeng noticed first. His expression darkened instantly. We should leave, he said coldly. Wei Zhen arched a brow. Why? Now. Something dangerous flickered across all 5 disciples' faces. Xinyuan had no idea why. He only knew the room suddenly felt too small. The disciples left reluctantly. Except Jilan. She remained beside the door, arms crossed. Watching him. Guarding him? No. Probably making sure he didn't escape. Much more reasonable. The moment the door closed, Xinyuan collapsed backward dramatically. I'm going to die. Outside, thunder shook the mountain sect. Inside, Xinyuan dug through fragmented memories desperately. The novel his sister loved. The Fallen Jade Master. A trashy BL cultivation story full of obsession, betrayal, and emotional damage disguised as romance. His sister forced him to listen to summaries while eating dinner. Mostly against his will. Which meant Xinyuan only remembered important things like Gu Chongfeng eventually slaughtered 3 sections, Wei Zhen poisoned people recreationally, Liuyan fought first and processed emotions never. Ji Lan became a terrifying sword empress. Xia Rui smiled while dissecting enemies alive. Wonderful disciples. Healthy environment. And all of them originally killed their master together. Xinyuan sat upright again. Nope, he whispered firmly. Absolutely not. We are fixing this family. Outside the room, something crashed violently. Then Liuyan shouted, Why does he look different? Wei Zhen answered lazily, Maybe death improved his personality. Xinyuan covered his face. They could still kill him. Actually, they probably still planned to kill him. The only difference now was confusion. He needed a strategy. A survival strategy. Rule 1. Do not act like the original villain. Rule 2. Avoid suspicious behavior. Rule 3. Absolutely never be alone with emotionally unstable disciples. The door suddenly opened again. Gu Chongfeng entered carrying medicine. Xinyuan nearly screamed. The disciple sat beside the bed silently. Too close. Far too handsome. Cultivation novels should legally limit facial structures. You're injured, Gu Chongfeng said quietly. By getting murdered? Gu Chongfeng ignored that. He dipped cloth into water and pressed it gently against Xinyuan's forehead. The touch was unexpectedly careful. Xinyuan stared at him suspiciously. You're not killing me? Not tonight. Not comforting. Not comforting at all. Gu Chongfeng's eyes remained fixed on him. Studying. Calculating. You really don't remember? I remember enough. Xinyuan swallowed. Enough to know you all hated him. Something sharp flickered across Gu Chongfeng's face. Hatred. Pain. Then Xinyuan noticed bruises hidden beneath the disciple's collar. Old bruises. Not battle wounds. The room suddenly felt colder. The original Yu Qingli truly had been monstrous. Guilt twisted unexpectedly in Xinyuan's chest despite none of it being his fault. He sighed heavily. This is exhausting, he muttered. I wake up dead, inherit trauma I didn't ask for, and now everyone wants revenge on me specifically. Terrible customer service. Gu Chongfeng stared. Then unexpectedly, a quiet sound escaped him. A laugh. Small. Brief. But real. Both of them froze. Because apparently Yu Qingli had never once made his disciples laugh either. Xinyuan pointed accusingly at him. There. You smiled. Emotional progress. Gu Chongfeng looked disturbed by the accusation. Good. He should be. Human attachment led to terrible decisions. And Xinyuan already had a terrible feeling these 5 disciples were about to make his life infinitely worse. Xinyuan survived 3 days without being assassinated. Frankly miraculous. He considered building a shrine for whichever deity handled transmigrator customer complaints. Unfortunately, surviving did not mean peace. It meant confusion. Because his disciples had started staring at him constantly. Not normal staring. Not respectful disciple staring. The kind of staring predators did before deciding whether to bite or marry something. Xinyuan hated it deeply. You're all acting weird, he announced during breakfast. 5 pairs of eyes lifted toward him. The atmosphere immediately became heavy. Terrible. Just terrible. The dining hall of Frost River Peak had once been elegant. White jade floors. Hanging lanterns. Ink paintings worth kingdoms. Now it felt like the world's deadliest hostage negotiation. Wei Jin smiled lazily while pouring tea. Shizhuan only noticed now. Don't call me that so affectionately, Xin Yuan complained. You were trying to kill me 4 days ago. Lu Yan shrugged while eating. We still might. Wonderful honesty. Really builds trust. Ji Lan hid the corner of her mouth behind her cup. Was she laughing? Impossible. This woman looked like she sharpened swords recreationally for stress relief. Xie Rui quietly placed more food into Xin Yuan's bowl. The youngest disciple had become strangely attentive lately. Too attentive. Yesterday Xin Yuan sneezed once, and Xie Rui nearly summoned 3 physicians and a spiritual exorcist. I can serve myself, Xin Yuan muttered. You forgot to eat twice yesterday. How do you know that? Silence. Xin Yuan slowly lowered his chopsticks. Oh no. Wei Jin grinned. Oh yes. Gu Chongfeng finally spoke from beside him. You wander at night. I walk. You nearly fell off a cliff. One time. You apologized to a tree. Xin Yuan defended himself immediately. It looked judgmental. The disciples stared at him. Then Lu Yan burst into laughter, so suddenly he choked on tea. Ji Lan looked away sharply. Shoulders shaking. Even Gu Chongfeng's mouth twitched. Xin Yuan felt personally offended. You people are very rude. The atmosphere eased unexpectedly. Not safe. Never safe. But lighter. Which honestly made Xin Yuan more nervous. Because according to every novel rule ever written, emotionally unstable people becoming attached to you always ended horribly. Usually with chains. Or murder. Or both simultaneously if the author had unresolved issues. Xin Yuan eyed them suspiciously over his tea. Very attractive problems. Every single one. Gu Chongfeng was composed elegance hiding terrifying violence beneath calm eyes. Wei Jin looked like a seductive fox spirit who absolutely committed crimes for entertainment. Lu Yan radiated enough raw alpha energy to frighten wildlife. Ji Lan was cold, beautiful, and somehow more intimidating than most sect leaders. And Xie Rui watched Xin Yuan like a starving man staring at his last meal. Concerning behavior. Very concerning. A disciple suddenly entered the hall breathlessly. Peak Master. Elder Zhao requests your presence immediately. The mood changed instantly. Gu Chongfeng's expression darkened. Ji Lan's fingers tapped lightly against her sword. Nobody moved. Xin Yuan blinked. What? Wei Jin smiled without warmth. Elder Zhao enjoys humiliating Frost River Peak. Ah. Politics. Humanity's favorite hobby besides making terrible emotional decisions. Xin Yuan sighed dramatically before standing. Fine. If I die, distribute my possessions fairly. You own nothing, Lu Yan said. Then distribute my emotional legacy. You also don't have that, Ji Lan added calmly. Cruel disciples. Xin Yuan left while muttering complaints under his breath. Unfortunately, Elder Zhao truly was awful. The old man sat inside the Grand Council Hall, looking like arrogance had gained sentience. Around him stood several elders and disciples from other peaks. The moment Xin Yuan entered, silence spread. Judgmental silence. Apparently Yu Qingli's reputation among other sects remained immaculate. Elegant robes. Graceful demeanor. Perfect omega beauty. Meanwhile Xin Yuan currently looked sleep-deprived and mildly homicidal. Peak Master Yu. Elder Zhao greeted smoothly. You seem different lately. Xin Yuan smiled politely. Near-death experiences build character. Several elders frowned. Elder Zhao continued. We've received complaints regarding your disciples. Of course they had. People hated talented protagonists. Classic cultivation behavior. What kind of complaints? Violence. Threats. Disorderly conduct. Lu Yan definitely punched somebody. Possibly several somebodies. Xin Yuan already felt tired. Then Elder Zhao smiled thinly. Perhaps Frost River Peak lacks proper discipline due to distractions. The implication settled heavily. Omega. Weak. Emotional. Unsuitable. Xin Yuan's smile disappeared. He might avoid conflict usually. He might fear death constantly. But he hated this tone. The same superior tone people used in every workplace, every school, every stupid social hierarchy. Shen Yuan folded his sleeves calmly. Interesting. Elder Zhao continued smugly. A proper master controls disciples before they become uncontrollable beasts. Several disciples nearby shifted uncomfortably, because everyone knew Elder Zhao specifically despised alphas, especially strong ones. Something cold slid beneath Shen Yuan's skin. Danger. Real danger. Not toward himself. Toward his disciples. And suddenly he understood why the original Yu Qingli became protective in twisted ways. These 5 disciples grew up surrounded by fear and suspicion because they were powerful alphas. The cultivation world praised strength publicly while fearing it privately. Shen Yuan smiled slowly. Wrong expression. Very wrong. Elder Zhao, he said softly, would you like to test whether my disciples are uncontrollable beasts? The room stilled. Spiritual pressure exploded outward from Shen Yuan violently enough to crack marble beneath his feet. Several elders paled. Shen Yuan himself looked surprised. Oh, he said quietly. This body is stronger than I expected. Outside the hall, 5 familiar presences suddenly appeared. His disciples. They had followed him. Of course they had. Emotionally healthy boundaries were extinct on this mountain. Elder Zhao's expression darkened. You dare threaten an elder? No, Shen Yuan answered pleasantly. I'm informing you. Then he stepped closer. Smile still gentle. Eyes suddenly terrifying. My disciples are dangerous, he whispered. But not as dangerous as me when I'm angry. The killing intent in the room became suffocating. Even Shen Yuan almost frightened himself. Honestly impressive. Elder Zhao finally looked uncertain. Good. Fear built character. Shen Yuan turned smoothly and left the hall before his bluff collapsed completely. Outside, all 5 disciples waited silently. Gu Chongfeng looked at him strangely. Wei Zhen's eyes glittered with fascination. Lu Yan grinned like he'd witnessed something deeply entertaining. Jilan stepped closer first. You defended us. Obviously. You hate trouble. I hate disrespect more. Silence. Then suddenly Shen Yuan realized all 5 were staring again. Not normal staring. That dangerous one. Like wolves discovering their favorite thing had teeth. Shen Yuan immediately pointed at them. No obsession. Wei Zhen blinked innocently. Who said anything about obsession? You people radiate psychological issues. Lu Yan laughed loudly. Gu Chongfeng moved closer beside Shen Yuan as they walked back toward Frost River Peak. Close enough that shoulders brushed accidentally. Not accidental. Definitely not accidental. Shen Yuan narrowed his eyes. You're invading my personal space. You didn't move away. I was distracted. By what? Shen Yuan looked at him honestly. Fear. For the first time in years, Gu Chongfeng genuinely smiled. And Shen Yuan suddenly realized something deeply unfortunate. These disciples liked him better this way. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Not pretending perfection. Just strange. Cowardly. Sharp-tongued. Protective in all the wrong ways. Human. Which meant Shen Yuan had another serious survival problem now. Because people who had been starved of affection their entire lives became terrifyingly attached to kindness. And his disciples? Already looked hungry. Shen Yuan woke up to screaming. Not unusual in cultivation sects. Usually someone was either ascending, exploding spiritually, discovering forbidden love, or fighting over herbs worth less than the emotional damage involved. He rolled over lazily, then recognized the voice. Lu Yan. Someone's dying, Shen Yuan muttered. A second later his bedroom door slammed open. Xia Rui entered covered in blood. Shen Yuan sat upright instantly. Who's dead? No one. Then why are you dressed like a murder confession? Xia Rui blinked slowly. The blood on his face made the expression deeply unsettling. Second senior brother challenged 3 inner disciples. Why? They insulted Shizhuan. Shen Yuan stared at him. Then at the blood. Then back at him. And you helped. They were disrespectful. Shen Yuan grabbed his forehead. This sect needs therapy. He hurried outside, still half-dressed, spiritual robe hanging loosely from one shoulder while trying not to trip over stairs. Cold mountain air hit him immediately. Frost River Peak was beautiful in the irritating way wealthy people described simple living, while owning 12 estates. Snow drifted softly across black stone courtyards. Pine trees swayed beside hanging lanterns. Spiritual cranes circled overhead dramatically because cultivation worlds refused subtlety. At the center courtyard, Lu Yen stood surrounded by unconscious disciples. Correction. Very unconscious disciples. One man was embedded into a wall. How hard did you punch him? Xin Yuan demanded. Lu Yen looked genuinely confused. Not that hard. The wall had collapsed. Xin Yuan pointed accusingly. Your definition of restraint concerns me. Nearby disciples from other peaks trembled visibly. Good. Fear prevented paperwork. Jilan stood beside the courtyard quietly cleaning her sword. No blood, which somehow felt more threatening. Wei Jin sat on the railing eating fruit while enjoying the chaos like this was theater performance. Gu Changfeng noticed Xin Yuan first. His gaze paused, stilled, then darkened slightly. Xin Yuan frowned. What? No answer. Instead, Gu Changfeng stepped forward and pulled Xin Yuan's robe properly over his shoulder. You came out like this? Xin Yuan blinked. It's my house. Wei Zhen nearly choked laughing. Lu Yen abruptly looked away. Ji Lan's sword slipped slightly in her grip. Xie Rue stared directly at Xin Yuan's exposed neck with the concentration of a man approaching religious enlightenment. The atmosphere changed. Again, Xin Yuan hated when this happened because he never understood why. You're all acting possessed. Wei Zhen smiled weakly. That's one interpretation. Then suddenly Xin Yuan smelled it again. Pinewood. Smoke. Snow. Something sharper underneath. His body heated instantly. The sensation swept through him so fast he grabbed the railing for balance. Gu Changfeng noticed immediately. Shizhuan, I'm fine. Lie. His skin burned strangely. His heartbeat stumbled. And for some reason every alpha nearby suddenly smelled overwhelming. Xin Yuan backed away instinctively. The disciples froze. All 5 expressions changed simultaneously. Dangerous. Predatory. Hungry. Human beings truly lost evolutionary privilege the moment pheromones entered fiction. We should create distance, Jilan said abruptly. Her voice sounded strained. Lu Yen looked seconds away from biting through stone. Wei Zhen's smile disappeared entirely. Even Xie Rue looked unstable. Xin Yuan pointed weakly at them. This feels medically concerning. Gu Changfeng grabbed his wrist gently. The contact sent heat racing through Xin Yuan's entire body. He nearly yelped. Gu Changfeng's eyes darkened immediately. Inside, he said hoarsely. What is happening? No answer. Which meant everyone knew something except him. Classic transmigrator experience. Inside Xin Yuan's chambers, all 5 disciples stood disturbingly far away from him now. Like people trying not to commit crimes. Xin Yuan sat on the bed suspiciously. You're making this weird. Wei Zhen laughed once. Short. Breathless. Shizhuan, he said carefully. Has no one explained secondary genders to you? My what? Silence. Jilan looked genuinely horrified. Xie Rue whispered softly. He really doesn't know. Xin Yuan crossed his arms. I'm starting to dislike this conversation. Gu Changfeng spoke carefully. You are an Omega. Xin Yuan waited. Nothing. Okay. The disciples stared. Lu Yen looked physically pained. Wei Zhen covered his face suddenly. Oh, this is incredible. Xin Yuan narrowed his eyes. No one in this world explains anything properly. Use smaller words. Jilan inhaled slowly like someone enduring divine punishment. Alphas and omegas are biologically compatible. Compatible for what? Another silence. Then Lu Yen finally exploded. For breeding. Xin Yuan choked on air. Absolutely everything suddenly made horrifying sense. The sense. The reactions. The weird tension. The original villain's behavior. His sister reading weird novels at 3 in the morning. All connected. Xin Yuan pointed at all 5 disciples with betrayal in his eyes. You're all alphas? Yes, Gu Chongfeng answered quietly. And nobody thought to mention this sooner? You seemed unaware, Weijin admitted. I was. Xia Rui stepped closer slowly. Too slowly. Like approaching frightened prey. Shizhuan. Don't Shizhuan me right now. Xin Yuan stood immediately. Then sat back down because his legs suddenly felt weak. Oh no. Oh no. Wei Zhen's expression sharpened. The heat is starting early. The what? Nobody answered fast enough. Xin Yuan's spiritual veins pulsed violently. Heat flooded his body. His breathing became uneven. The disciples smelled overwhelming now. Every scent wrapped around him thickly until thinking became difficult. Gu Chongfeng moved first. He knelt beside the bed. Calm. Controlled. Terrifyingly controlled. Look at me. Xin Yuan glared weakly. I blame my sister for this. Reasonable. She skipped important information. Clearly. The calmness in Gu Chongfeng's voice helped slightly. Only slightly. Because the other disciples looked one bad decision away from tearing the room apart. Jilan finally spoke quietly. We should leave. Lu Yan immediately snapped. And leave him alone like this? You're making it worse. So are you. Wei Zhen laughed softly from the corner. Interesting. We're all losing control together. Xin Yuan grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. Stop enjoying this. Wei Zhen caught it one-handed easily. Then slowly pressed his face into the fabric, breathing in Xin Yuan's scent. The room went dead silent. Even Xin Yuan froze. Wei Zhen lowered the pillow gradually. His beautiful smile returned. Wrong. Very wrong. Apologies, he murmured. That was inappropriate. You think. But nobody missed the way the other disciples stared murderously at the pillow afterward. Xin Yuan suddenly realized something horrifying. These people were jealous. Over a pillow. His survival odds continued collapsing impressively. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains again. Inside the room, 5 alphas stared at their Omega Master like starving men pretending civilization still existed. And Xin Yuan finally understood the real plot of this novel. He was not surviving a revenge story anymore. He was surviving a possession story. Much worse. By midnight, Frost River Peak had become a disaster zone. Spiritual barriers covered every entrance. Sword arrays glowed across the mountain paths. Outer disciples fled in terror after Lu Yan nearly snapped at someone for breathing too loudly near Xin Yuan's courtyard. And inside the main chambers, Xin Yuan was dying dramatically beneath 3 blankets. It's hot, he groaned. Then immediately, why is it cold? Xia Rui calmly adjusted another blanket over him. Your temperature is unstable. You're unstable. Correct. At least the boy was honest. Xin Yuan buried his burning face into the pillow miserably. Everything smelled overwhelming. The blankets smelled like sandalwood because Jilan apparently washed them herself. The room smelled like medicinal herbs because Xia Rui kept brewing suppressants. And the air itself reeked of alpha pheromones thick enough to make Xin Yuan dizzy. Pinewood. Smoke. Iron. Snow. Spice. Every scent wrapped around him until thinking became difficult. This is biological terrorism, Xin Yuan whispered weakly. Wei Zhen laughed softly from the window. He sat there casually while reading a scroll like this wasn't the most psychologically dangerous room in existence. You're surprisingly adorable during heat. Xin Yuan threw a cup at him. Wei Zhen caught it without looking. Insufferable, Xin Yuan muttered. Still speaking clearly, Gu Chongfeng noted quietly from beside the bed. Good. He'd been there for hours. Not touching. Not crowding. Just sitting close enough that Xin Yuan unconsciously relaxed whenever the eldest disciple spoke. Which honestly felt suspicious. Gu Chongfeng was too calm. Too controlled. Like a sword balanced perfectly before cutting someone in half. Xin Yuan squinted at him through blurry vision. You're handling this weirdly well. I'm trying. That answer concerns me. The room fell silent briefly. Outside, wind rattled against the paper windows. Then suddenly Lu Yan stormed inside. I found another one. Ji-lan entered behind him, dragging an unconscious disciple by the collar. Shin Yuan blinked slowly. "Why is there a body?" "He snuck near your courtyard," Ji-lan answered calmly. The unconscious disciple whimpered from the floor. "I just wanted to deliver soup." "Suspicious soup," Lu Yen growled. "It was mushroom soup." "Exactly." Shin Yuan stared at the ceiling. "I miss electricity." Gu Chongfeng pinched the bridge of his nose. "We cannot keep attacking disciples. They're hovering around Shizun's peak like vultures." Lu Yen snapped back. Wei Jin smiled pleasantly. "To be fair, Omega heat scents travel far." Shin Yuan froze. "Travel?" Nobody answered. Because outside the barriers, the entire sect had absolutely noticed something strange happening on Frost River Peak. A powerful Omega in heat. A dangerous Omega. One guarded by 5 terrifying alphas. Cultivators across neighboring peaks were already gossiping themselves unconscious. Humanity remained deeply embarrassing in every universe. Shin Yuan sat up suddenly. Big mistake. Heat crashed through him violently. His spiritual veins pulsed painfully. A soft sound escaped his throat before he could stop it. The room instantly changed. Every alpha went still. The air became suffocating. Gu Chongfeng's fingers tightened against the bed frame hard enough to crack wood. Lu Yan's breathing deepened. Wei Jin slowly lowered his scroll. Xia Rui looked seconds away from climbing directly onto the bed. Ji Lan turned away sharply. Shin Yuan immediately pointed at them. "No." Nobody moved. "Good." Then Wei Jin smiled faintly. "You should not make that sound around alphas." "I didn't make it on purpose." The heat made everything humiliating. His body felt unbearably sensitive. His robes suddenly felt too tight. Every scent dragged strange warmth through him. And worst of all, he wanted comfort, wanted touch, which was frankly horrifying. Shin Yuan wrapped himself tighter in blankets stubbornly. "I refuse to participate in Omega nonsense." "Unfortunately," Wei Jin said lightly, "your biology disagrees." Shin Yuan glared murderously. Then suddenly another wave hit. Harder. His breath caught sharply. Before he could react, Gu Chongfeng was already beside him. One hand steady against Shin Yuan's shoulder. Grounding. Warm. The contact sent relief through Shin Yuan so intensely he almost leaned into it automatically. That realization horrified him more than the heat itself. Gu Chongfeng noticed too. His expression darkened instantly. "Careful," Ji-lan warned quietly. Not to Shin Yuan. To Gu Chongfeng. "Interesting. Very terrible." Gu Chongfeng slowly withdrew his hand. The loss of warmth made Shin Yuan irrationally irritated. "This is stupid," he muttered. "No argument there," Wei Jin agreed. Xia Rui approached carefully with medicine. "You need suppressants." Shin Yuan drank it immediately. Then gagged violently. "This tastes cursed." "It's expensive." "That doesn't help." Xia Rui unexpectedly smiled. Small. Soft. Dangerously affectionate. The youngest disciple brushed loose hair away from Shin Yuan's damp forehead gently. Too gently. Shin Yuan's pulse jumped. And not entirely from heat. Oh no. Absolutely not. Emotional attachment during chemically unstable conditions was how people ended up married accidentally. The room suddenly shook violently. Everyone looked up sharply. A pressure slammed against the mountain barriers outside. Alpha pheromones. 4-in-1s. Gu Chongfeng stood instantly. Killing intent flooded the room, so cold even Shin Yuan shivered. "Someone is outside the peak," Ji-lan said flatly. Lu Yen grinned dangerously. Finally, Shin Yuan grabbed Gu Chongfeng's sleeve before he could leave. "Don't kill anybody." Gu Chongfeng looked down at him quietly. Shin Yuan's hand was still clutching his sleeve tightly. Too close. Too intimate. The eldest disciple's expression changed slightly. Something restrained snapped thinner. "I'll try," he answered hoarsely. All 5 disciples left moments later. The room became quiet. Too quiet. Shin Yuan curled weakly against the blankets, trying to ignore the heat crawling beneath his skin. His thoughts drifted strangely. To Gu Chongfeng's steady hands. Ji-lan silently standing guard outside his room every night. Wei Jin smiling only around him lately. Lu Yan carrying him down mountain paths whenever he got tired. Xia Rui memorizing every tiny preference he had. Xin Yuan buried his face deeper into the pillow. This is bad, because somewhere along the way, these terrifying disciples stopped feeling like future murderers and started feeling dangerously close to home. Outside, explosions echoed across Frost River Peak, while his disciples violently defended their Omega Master from the rest of the world. Inside, Shen Yuan realized something even more dangerous. A part of him no longer wanted to run away. By dawn, Frost River Peak looked like a battlefield. Half the outer courtyard had been destroyed. 3 elders were threatening formal complaints. Someone's spiritual beast was missing. And Lu Yan was banned from entering the Eastern Training Grounds permanently. Again, Xin Yuan listened to all this while sitting weakly beneath blankets drinking medicinal tea with the expression of a man reconsidering every life decision that led here. This sect is exhausting. No one asked those disciples to provoke us, Lu Yan argued. You threw one into a pond. He survived. That's not the standard. Wei Jin sat beside the window smiling pleasantly. They were spreading rumors about Shizuan. What rumors? Silence. Xin Yuan narrowed his eyes. What rumors? Jilan answered flatly. That we were fighting over mating rights. The room went quiet. Then Xin Yuan slowly lowered his tea. Were you? Nobody answered. Absolutely horrifying. Xin Yuan covered his face. I'm going to ascend from stress alone. His heat still burned beneath his skin, though the suppressants dulled the worst of it now. Unfortunately, the relief only made him more aware of everything else. Like how close his disciples kept sitting. How their eyes followed him constantly. How every alpha scent in the room wrapped around him possessively. He noticed things now. Terrible things. Gu Chongfeng always positioned himself closest to the door, like guarding territory. Jilan silently destroyed anything carrying unfamiliar pheromones near Xin Yuan's chambers. Wei Jin touched him casually whenever possible. Fingers brushing sleeves. Hands against his waist while helping. Xia Rui openly slept beside Xin Yuan's bed now because medical observation was necessary. And Lu Yan looked at him like a starving wolf, trying desperately to behave. Humanity should never have invented alpha instincts. Outside, snow drifted softly across the mountain peak. Inside, Xin Yuan's life continued collapsing beautifully. A knock sounded at the door. Then an elder's furious voice echoed outside. Peak Master Yu, explain why your disciples attacked guests from the Heavenly Sword sect. Lu Yan crossed his arms. They were staring at Shizuan. That's not illegal. It should be. Gu Chongfeng stood smoothly. I'll handle it. Xin Yuan immediately grabbed his sleeve. No killing. A pause. Gu Chongfeng looked down quietly at Xin Yuan's hand gripping his robe. Again, always unconsciously seeking contact lately. The eldest disciple's gaze darkened faintly. Understood. The door closed behind him. Silence settled briefly. Then Wei Jin suddenly spoke. You trust us now. Xin Yuan looked up. Wei Jin's smile had faded completely. No teasing. No games. Just quiet observation. Dangerous. Xin Yuan sighed softly. That's probably my biggest mistake. Jilan's eyes lowered slightly. Xia Rui's fingers tightened around the medicine bowl in his hands. Lu Yan looked strangely pleased. Wei Jin stepped closer. Even after knowing what we are? Xin Yuan snorted weakly. You say that like I'm not currently trapped in a mountain sect with 5 overprotective lunatics. That isn't an answer. No, it wasn't. The truth sat heavily in Xin Yuan's chest. Because he remembered the original novel clearly now. These 5 disciples were supposed to become monsters. Cold rulers. Violent tyrants. People feared across the cultivation world. But here they sat surrounding him quietly like loyal wolves, waiting for permission to breathe. And Xin Yuan realized something important. Nobody had protected them before. Not truly. The original Yu Qingli twisted affection into control. The sect elders feared them. Other disciples avoided them. The world only valued them as weapons. Yet somehow, These terrifying people had become soft only around him. Xin Yuan rubbed tiredly at his face. This is emotionally manipulative. Wei Zhen laughed softly. You raised us badly. I didn't raise anyone. I arrived here traumatized and confused. Still worked. Unfortunately true. A sudden wave of heat rolled through Xin Yuan again. Stronger this time. His breathing faltered instantly. The room changed immediately. Alpha pheromones thickened heavily. Jilan cursed under her breath for the first time ever. Xia Rui nearly dropped the medicine bowl. Lu Yan stood abruptly like restraining himself, physically hurt. Wei Zhen's pupils narrowed dangerously. And Gu Changfeng returned just in time to freeze in the doorway. Their eyes met. Xin Yuan's pulse jumped hard. The heat was worsening again. Suppressants were failing. Oh no, he whispered. The room fell deadly silent. Every alpha scent crashed together violently now. Pinewood. Smoke. Snow. Steel. Spice. Xin Yuan felt dizzy. Warm. Sensitive. And terrifyingly aware of all 5 disciples staring at him. Not disciples anymore. Alphas. His body recognized it instinctively now. Gu Changfeng closed the door quietly behind him. The click echoed loudly. Shizhuan, he said softly, look at me. Bad idea. Xin Yuan looked anyway. The eldest disciple's composure was cracking finally. Barely. But enough. His eyes looked darker. Hungrier. Possessive. Not toward a master. Toward an omega they intended to keep. Xin Yuan's breath caught. This feels illegal. Wei Zhen laughed weakly. Unfortunately not. Jilan moved beside the bed first. Calm. Controlled. But her hands trembled slightly when she touched Xin Yuan's cheek. The warmth nearly melted him. You smell sweet, she whispered before stopping herself abruptly. Xin Yuan stared at her in betrayal. You too. Lu Yan barked out startled laughter. Even Xia Rui smiled helplessly. The tension finally snapped. Suddenly everyone was speaking at once. Move away from him. You're crowding Shizhuan. You touched him first. He leaned toward me. You're all irritating. Absolute chaos. Xin Yuan sat in the middle of it watching 5 terrifying alphas argue over him like emotionally unstable spiritual beasts. And somehow, he laughed. The disciples froze immediately. Xin Yuan covered his eyes while laughing helplessly into his hands. This is insane, he said breathlessly. I woke up expecting revenge and murder. Instead I got whatever psychological disaster this is. Silence. Then slowly, carefully, Gu Changfeng knelt beside him. We can stop. The words shocked everyone. Even Xin Yuan. Gu Changfeng's voice remained quiet. If you truly wish to leave, we will let you go. A lie. Probably. Maybe. But Xin Yuan saw genuine fear hidden underneath. Not fear of rejection. Fear of hurting him. The room became painfully still. 5 alphas waiting for judgment. And Xin Yuan realized the final truth at last. He loved them. These violent, obsessive, emotionally damaged disciples. Loved the way Jilan silently protected him. Loved Lu Yan's blunt loyalty. Loved Wei Zhen's dangerous smile softening only around him. Loved Xia Rui's careful hands. Loved Gu Changfeng most painfully of all. Xin Yuan looked at them helplessly. I really made the worst survival plan imaginable. Wei Zhen smiled faintly. So you're staying? Xin Yuan opened his mouth. Then another heat wave slammed into him violently enough to make him gasp. Lu Yan caught him instantly before he fell sideways. Strong arms. Warm scent. Safety. Xin Yuan buried his burning face into Lu Yan's shoulder automatically. The room went dead silent again. Then Jilan muttered. That answer's enough. Xin Yuan realized what he'd done. Too late. Much too late. 5 alpha gazes locked onto him possessively. Hungrily. Lovingly. And Xin Yuan finally understood something horrifying. There was no escaping anymore. Not because they wouldn't let him go, but because somewhere along the way, Frost River Peak had become his home.